Hello and welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series on the GNAT-TV News Project. I'm Andrew McKeever. Today is Monday, February 16th, and we're continuing on with a series of conversations we've been having with area legislators who have been keeping us up to speed on what's been going on up in Montpelier. Now that the session is getting almost to the halfway point, roughly, I guess town meeting a couple of weeks away is the rough dividing line there. So today, we're really pleased and honored to have with us two of the area state representatives. Pritchard is a representative who represents a district that includes the towns of Paulet, Rupert, Middletown Springs, Tinmouth, and Wells. Boy, that's a lot of towns in there.
Well, I share Wells with Patty McCoy. So.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. That's good. And Chris Morrow is also here. He represents a district that includes the towns of Winhall, Londonderry, Weston, and Andover.
Correct.
Did I forget anyone?
Yeah, 4 towns, 3 counties.
Well, that keeps you on the road a bit then.
It does.
Anyway, well, great. Thank you both for making the time for this conversation. I really appreciate that. And there's so much to talk about. So let's just dive right in. I guess still, when the session started back in January, the big topic was probably education reform, the follow-up to Act 73 that was passed last year. It seems like that's still kind of topic A. So why don't we start there? I guess I wondered, Chris Morrow, I'll let you get us started here. Where do things stand at the moment in terms of the follow-up to Act 73? Because the redistricting task force that was formed as a result of that legislation was supposed to come up with 3 maps to divide the state into new school districts and supervisory unions or supervisory districts. But they instead came up with a recommendation for voluntary mergers and didn't come up with a map. So where do we stand? I know the chair of the House Education Committee, Peter Conlon, came up with a proposal, I think a couple of weeks ago, to divide the state up into 27 districts. But I guess he kind of referred to that as sort of a starting point. Mm-hmm. Does that seem like indeed it's going to be a starting point for where we're going to go?
Yeah, well, it is a starting point. The map is one thing, and we need to agree on a map if we're going to implement Act 73. But as important, or more important, is the governance structure that goes with the map. And so also last week he introduced a bunch of language that is not friendly to our district, especially tuitioning towns and independent schools. Unfortunately, from my perspective, the Education Committee is not spending enough time on the major cost drivers, which are headcount, health insurance, special education, and soon we'll be discussing the capital construction costs. And they're using tuitioning as a kind of red herring because it's an ideological whipping boy up in that chamber. And it's just something we spent way too much time on last session, and unfortunately we're moving in that direction this session. As far as I can tell, the Education Committee is split. There's multiple opinions. I don't think they can agree on much. And if they do get something out of that committee, it's going to be tough to get it through the chamber. So this is my opinion. I'd like to hear what Chris has to say, but it's really completely up in the air right now whether anything is going to come out of the chamber on education, despite the leadership's desire to make something happen. Not to go completely off the rails, but in my opinion, the setup we have now in state government in the legislature is broken, and we have a 19th century system which works well for a lot of small bills, and like in my committee, it works pretty well, but we're not equipped to take on fundamental widespread reform like education or what we need to do with healthcare and some other issues the way we're set up. It's You have the citizen legislature. We have about 2 months to get something done. Most people aren't experts in the field. The agency of education is weak at best, and so you can only rely on them to some certain extent. You have a bunch of poorly paid, no health insurance, no staff, no office. We're doing the best we can, but the system is not designed for what we're asking it to do, in my opinion. So,
well, maybe we can get into that a bit more later, but Representative Pritchard, let me turn to you then. What's your sense of how things are going on the education front up in the legislature?
I guess I'll be a little more direct and blunt than Representative Morrow. Yeah, it's a non-starter for me. I have heard from many constituents regarding preserving the choice that they presently have that has existed in some cases for decades. And with the present plan, Granville, Salem, Long Trail, and BBA are all in jeopardy. There has been a recent draft. I think it came out Friday. I don't know if Representative Morrow has seen it yet, Elizabeth St. James, that has corrected a lot of the language regarding independence, regarding schools out of state borders, that opens that back up and leaves that possibility in place. And I've read through the draft, and where it will go during this whole conversation, I don't know. But the choices for my constituents is an important issue. So I can't support. I mean, it's a non-starter. Where it stands now is a non-starter. I've spoken to Representative Rob Hunter, a little bit about it. I know he's not on board with it. So we just gotta fix it.
Well, how urgent is it that you actually do come up with something tangible by the end of the session in May or early June? I mean, because the companion piece to this is, as Representative Morrow referred to, is the cost of it all. I mean, property taxes are not going down. They've gone up, I think, 40% over the last 5 years. That's obviously unsustainable.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is it, we've got to come up with something by the end of the session that at least gets us on the track.
Well, I think the governor had hoped that
curve.
would have happened last session. I mean, I think he was really hoping to have a foundation formula in place. We've been buying down this property tax. We're going to spend $105 million on it this year to do the same thing. And, and it's not a good way to do it. The governor says it's not a good way to do it. But until some of these things get in place, and after they do, you will still probably be, for the next 2 or 3 years, having to buy down the property tax until this, takes shape and moves forward. So this is a long process. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in this biennium. It's probably not going to happen in the next biennium. The total program, but it's been frustrating. It's frustrating the time that we have spent and seem to really just spin our wheels on. It's discouraging for me. So,
going back to the independent school issue, of course, which I know is a major issue around here in Manchester and surrounding towns. I've often been puzzled as to why it is that apparently so many other of your colleagues up in Montpelier have very mixed feelings, shall I say, about independent schools. I mean, it's been pointed out to me several times that the number of students in independent schools across the state is a tiny fraction of the total,
it's like
4 or 5%, something
yeah.
like that. The total cost of all their budgets is
$63
relatively
million.
small.
Yeah.
Why is it that there seems to be so much pushback to letting independent schools kind of just continue on more or less as they've been going on?
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer for you. It's an ideological thing. People who haven't lived or put their kids through a system as flexible as ours. They just don't get it, and they think there's some fundamental fairness issue with, if it's public money, it should go to the schools should follow the same rules as public schools. It's not Montpelier's money. We voted as towns to send our money to independent schools, and we voted locally in our towns. We made our own choice to send our money to wherever our kids are going. We seamlessly transition kids from public schools, independent schools, and sometimes back. And for us, it's an integrated system that works very well. And we voted on it every year. So there's plenty of opportunity that if it wasn't working, we could vote it down. But people in Montpelier think it's their money, and it's a hard one. I've been fighting this battle since the day I walked in that building, and initially I thought it was, you could make headway with rational arguments, and I've come to the conclusion that it's not about rationality or facts. It's really an ideological thing that it's more like a religion than anything else at this point.
Interesting. Well, the whole consolidation piece of this has been kind of interesting to me because, as I was preparing over the weekend for this conversation, I realized that each of you represent towns that are, I think, in 3 different supervisory unions, each one of you. I mean, Representative Pritchard, you have Rupert and Paulet in the Meadowy District, which is in part of the BRSU.
Wells Spring, GRSU.
Middletown Springs is and Wells is in the Wells Springs Unified Union School District. And at some point you may want to explain what a unified union district is. That's in the Greater Rutland County Supervisory Union. And then Mill River you have in the Mill River Supervisory Union.
Timoth.
So 3 different SUs in your district. And Chris, I guess it's the same for you. We have Win Hall, which is a non-operating district that's part of the BRSU. And you also have Andover is in another district, the Green Mountain Supervisory Union, I think.
Right.
And then Weston's also in the
Weston and Londonderry are both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, there must be a more streamlined way of doing things than having that many supervisory unions and school districts, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm for consolidation in one form or another. We don't need 119 school districts around the state. I think it makes sense to consolidate and streamline our operations. So there's a lot of Act 73 that makes sense, but then there's big chunks that just don't work for us, depending on the map and the governance language. Again, that's where we get back to. But we need to streamline for sure. And the growth in you might have heard the statistics that Vermont has the highest staff to pupil ratio of any state in the country, right? So that's the major cost driver of our system. And the growth has not been in teachers, it's been in support staff. Partly because of special education, but that's only a chunk of it. We passed, this is long before I got to the legislature, I think it was 2018, Act 173, which was supposed to address special education costs, but the governor decided to fire the person who was charged with doing that and then kind of gutting the Agency of Education. And so it was implemented poorly at best, and now we're reaping the rewards of that, of extremely high and dysfunctional special education system. So, the legislature can come up with this perfect plan, but really, at the end of the day, we need the executive branch and the Agency of Education to be ready to implement it and capable of implementing it. And that's a huge open question, whether they can do that.
Well, I would imagine that in your district, the consolidation might also seem like a good thing to happen.
Well, I think certainly it needs to be planned for. There needs to be a plan B. Medowee, I think, originally had tried to reach out to Wells and talk about the merger. I mean, the Wells School has about 60 kids. It's a mile down the road from Medowee School, a few miles down the road. Medowee has the capacity to do that, and and I think it still greatly preserves the community. I mean, we're all right there. Unfortunately, they look at that differently. Originally when this started, Medowee was for districts, and BRSU was the Medowee folks were talking about going to districts. The Wellspring folks want supervisory unions. So, it's and that's part of the process. That's part of the deal here. There's just so much.
It's hard.
It's hard. It's a hard.
And I remember when Act 46 came in, a big question Rupert and Paul was being able to send kids to schools in New York State, where it was a lot less expensive.
A lot less expensive.
And
still is.
Yeah.
And still is. And, they have been utilized for decades. We have good relationships with them. I have some parents that are really concerned. They're concerned. A few of them are really concerned about Granville. Their children are thriving there, and they want that to continue. So.
Well, I guess to be continued then, but I guess I had thought that Act 73 was supposed to kind of begin to kick in this year, although that kind of was contingent on those maps being ready to go. And will the foundation formula still be able to happen if you don't have the maps in place?
I don't think so. No, it's all tied together.
Maps are prerequisite.
Yeah,
Yep.
Well, I guess the logical sequel to that would be something about property taxes. And has there been any discussion or focus around, other than from the education side, how do we get property tax expenses stabilized, if that's the right term? It takes us also into the more broader question about the state's overall economy and everything, and affordability issues. But is there any feeling that something needs to happen on how do we get property taxes down to a more sustainable level for a lot of folks before we see too many more people leaving the state, like we saw? I guess apparently the numbers came out recently that close to 2,000 people left the state last year. The population of the state declined by, I think it was 1,500 or so.
1,825.
1,825.
Yeah.
And cost of living, I'm sure, was a big part of that for many folks. Has that been a topic you've been discussing a lot with your colleagues up in?
I think that's the reason we both are there. I think that's the reason a lot of people were, the affordability issue. I'm disappointed that we haven't done a great job on addressing that. And it's a real issue for folks, especially folks that live and work within this Vermont economy. They're being harmed, and they're having to make difficult decisions. Until recently, there's a bill in the House I co-sponsored about a property tax freeze for 3 years. The governor's not crazy about it. It's probably not going to get any traction. Senator Baruth has put forth a spending cap on property taxes. The governor was more receptive to that. But something needs to move forward. It just needs to move forward. We're not, we can all say how we feel everybody's paying, but until they actually have a tangible, result to it, it's just talk. And I'm not sure we've tackled that. And there's a broad spectrum of things that affect that. The healthcare costs and many other things. But, recently there was a new caucus created, Caucus for Vermont's Economy, which Chris is a vice chair of. And that's what we're trying to deal with. We're trying to look at issues to make things better. Last Friday we had two folks from, speak before us. Jose Oliver, who owns a Subaru dealership in Rutland, and the CEO of Bolton Valley Ski. And, the story that they told should get everybody's attention. I mean, Jose Oliver has spent $1 million trying to create a new Subaru dealership. He's the one he's presently in is too small. He wants to relocate. He wants to relocate to an area that presently has an old dealership. He's willing, it's a brownfield area, but he's willing to do everything that he can to get going. He's waited 3 years. He just got his permit. He has spent $1 million. $1 million. The unfriendliness of business in the state has really hurt, has created many of our problems. We've talked about the permitting process, streamlining it, but to me, it's not just streamlining it. $1 million.
Was that on like legal fees or?
Well, it's regulatory fees, it's permitting fees, it's legal fees, it's everything involved in the process of getting, and one of the things that both of them discussed is, tell us what we need to do right up front. Give us all our permits right up front. Don't give us a permit. We go through it. We either reject it. We wait another 3 months. Then when we get that, we have to go to the next permit. Give us everything we need and let us move forward. I mean, these are folks, Rutland Subaru employs a lot of people. They provide a necessary service to folks, and they are very charitable in giving. The Rutland Hospital, they were involved in a COPE program for children. I mean, these are people that do good things, and we should be welcoming them here. And because we haven't, we find ourselves where we are today, as far as I'm concerned. I just, and it doesn't, for me, it's frustrating. It doesn't seem to stop. And I don't want to go off subject, but, one of the things I think that is contributing to the whole mess is Act 181 is going to have effect on people. And it's going to have an effect on the rural areas. And there's no question in my mind about it. It is making it difficult for people to do, to be able to do things with their property.
That's the Act 250 reform bill.
That's the Act 250 reform bill. So there was a bill put forth by Representative Sibilia from Dover, and it's an excellent bill addressing this and addressing the property values, how they will be affected by not being able to, do stuff with your land. It affects our forestry industry. There's a whole multitude of bad things about Act 181 that need to be addressed. I mean, it benefits, the Burlingtons and the Essex and the bigger places. Really, it gives them benefits that it kind of takes away from rural areas. I hope her bill will go forward, but it's in my committee, and I can tell you I'm not optimistic that it is going to.
That bill was a product of the whole Rural Caucus, so there's not just one legislator.
Yeah.
It's dozens of us who signed on.
Tripartisan support, Republicans, Independents, Democrats.
Yeah, we both signed on to that.
Has a lot of support, and it needs to go forward. And the frustrating part for me with the way things happen up there is how bills are dealt with. We have a lot of bills on our wall that will help people that our chair refuses to take up, and it's not right. And I realize that she's privileged to that, but I just wish she would hear some of the committee members. And all we're advocating for is let's have a conversation about these things. Let's talk about these things. You know, and it doesn't occur in my committee. You know, we've got 6 bills right now. 3 of them are my chair's. They're her own bills.
What people might not, who aren't in it day to day, understand how it works. And it was a surprise to me is the committee chairs have tremendous power. You know, everyone's in the House, everyone's on one committee. On the Senate, everyone's on 2 committees. And the committee chairs can really decide what we take up and what we don't. And absent of strong leadership in the Speaker of the House or the Senate pro tem or a push by the governor, you know, they're really doing their own thing, you know, and certain key chairs, Mr. Pritchard's chair being one of them, are you know, kind of have a narrow purview of what they want to get done. They've got their own idea of things, and they're not listening to their committees, and they're not listening to the caucus as a whole, and the chamber as a whole, and therefore some key legislation is not even being considered. And it's a real problem with how that place runs.
A real problem.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating. It's very discouraging. You know, really 13 people hold the power to what happens, period. If you're a committee chair or the speaker, you decide the agenda. And it's unfortunate that it's that way, you know. And it shouldn't be that way regardless whether the Democrats are in charge or the Republicans, because it doesn't serve the people well. It just doesn't serve them well. Yeah. So that's, you know, for me, the most rewarding part of what I've been able to do is actually goes back to the towns that I represent. I've had over 60 people reach out to me with problems. I haven't been able to help everybody. There hasn't been a legislative pathway for some, but some people I've been able to make big changes for and help. So that's the part I'm grateful for. The stuff that occurs in the chamber, not so much, because I just don't feel we're helping people the way we could be helping people. And again, we hear the term ideology. I just, you know, and it's funny, we can sit down at the lunch table and talk about things, and Chris and I don't agree on everything either, but we can have a good conversation, as I can with many of my Democratic colleagues, and try to bring our differences together. But it all evaporates when we go to the chamber and take a vote. That's just the way I look at it. You know, it just, you know, the discussions we have, the progress we want to make, it evaporates when we go to the chamber and take a vote. And if you look at the voting record, it's clear to see. There's no question about it. It's clear to see. And that's unfortunate.
Just want to piggyback on something Chris brought up, which is something I've been involved in starting a new caucus this session called the Caucus for Vermont's Economy to focus on some of these issues. And I won't go over everything that Chris mentioned on permitting. We started addressing permitting initially. That was our first topic, because you can very easily protect the environment or sprawl or whatever you're permitting for, and have a streamlined, transparent, timely permitting process. Virginia is an example of a state that has an excellent system. It's all online. You understand exactly where you are in the process. It's clearly delineated what you need to get in, you know, and what time. You see everything. You understand the fee structure in advance. You know, the state is required to respond in a certain number of days. It's just a 21st century permitting. And that is not taking away anything from the protections. That's just good governance. And so we're focusing on kind of shifting state government towards a more customer service orientation, where, you know, the people in state government are here to find a way to make things happen in a better way for Vermonters, whether they're businesses or just the citizens. And I think it's state government has gotten away from seeing the citizens of the state as their customers. You know, there's a lot of bureaucratic morass, and people get in their little silos. You know, state government is very siloed, and they lose sight of the bigger picture. And so what we're trying to do is to kind of broaden out a little bit and get people to see, you know, the connections and get out of their silos and try to approach state government as a service for Vermonters. And some of that is, you know, because of the executive order the governor put forth in September, October, or it was ostensibly around housing. You know, some of this work has started, especially in the Department of Environmental Conservation, who we had testify in our committee, which is a lot of the permits go through DEC, and they're notoriously bad, especially the Wetlands Department. And so over the next year, they have a plan to rationalize that, create a central hub, create navigators. So if you have a permit you'll come into one place, and you won't need to get 15 different permits. And so some work is being done. We'll see what it looks like a year from now.
And what Chris has mentioned, you know, the governor's executive order 0625, this is just another example of what sometimes happens up there. The governor put this executive order in place to free up and promote this housing. My chair has made a concerted effort to have this overturned based on that it violates the wetlands laws. So she is actively working with Senator Watson in Natural Resources to have this executive order rescinded. And it just doesn't make any sense to me that's being done. And we spent hours on it in committee talking about it. And you know, it's those type of impediments. And certainly, Chris can tell you about the wetland protection laws. I mean, he's been dealing with constituents, and he's gotten appreciation for how challenging they can be on stuff. And you know, listen, we need to preserve the beauty of the state and all the attributes it has, and it's necessary that that we protect it. But sometimes it goes too far. And the human factor and how it affects our citizens isn't part of the discussion. And it needs to start being part of the discussion. How will this affect folks' property rights? And, you know, our wetlands are, you know, in statute, they need to grow, you know, 1.5% or whatever a year. Well, you could be in the process of getting a permit, get it all taken care of, and if a wetland encroaches onto that permitted area, you're out of luck. That shouldn't be that way. And we just need to be more common sense about these things.
It's interesting because I would have thought Act 181 that you referenced there was a revision of a 50-year-old legislation, Act 250, land use legislation. Wasn't that designed to kind of create these set of tiers where you spelled out very clearly, well, you can do this here and you can do this here, but you know, you can't over here, designed to kind of help that process move along a little more rationally.
You just can't do it in Tier 3 without lots of restrictions.
Yeah,
and that's the problem.
Yeah. No, it has potential, but it needs tweaking clearly. Once they started the mapping process, the tiers are all mapped out across the whole state, and they're in that draft process now. And part of that process, we digging into the details of it. There are some serious problems, and that's what the Rural Caucus bill does, is try to slow things down and address some of the problems. It's not throw a 181 out the window. It's like, all right, we had these intended consequences, we have some unintended consequences. Let's fix this before we just steamroll ahead.
And it's tried to be designed around the Vermont conservation design. But here's what's going on with this. That piece was never meant to be regulatory. And that's where they're trying to push this Vermont. And I have a problem with that. I have a real problem with that. And those are things. Act 181 has a lot of good things in it. but it has some real bad things in it. And I think through the process, we just need to fix them and give equity to everybody, everybody.
Well, let me follow up with that with another question about a different subject, but kind of leans into some of what you're talking about here. That's around the housing issue, which of course is another major issue the state is confronting. We've all heard about it now for a very long time. Houses are expensive in the state. Affordable housing is difficult to find, shall we say. And yet last week here in Manchester, there was a meeting of a task force from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, the Homes for All, 802 Homes, I think it's called, where the idea would be to come up with a set of, I think, 10 designs for houses that would be pre-approved by local zoning boards, so that, if you wanted to build a house in a vacant lot in town, or even on a field somewhere on the outskirts of town, and you were going to follow these designs that were pre-approved, so you basically speed that up, and you wouldn't be sitting in front of a development review board for 2 or 3 years waiting to get a permit approval. So I guess 2 questions. Do you think that approach has some promise and potential? And secondly, what else can we do in Vermont to kind of help accelerate the construction of the number of homes that we apparently need? And I guess this also, thirdly, I'm really getting to a complicated question here. Housing has been tied in so many times to the economy of the state in general. People who would like to move here and have an opportunity to get a nice job can't afford to find a house that they can live in. So there's a lot of interconnections going on there, and I'm going to stop right there. And I don't know which one of you wants to jump in on that one first, but does that sound like we're kind of beginning to at least slowly maneuver our way in the right direction?
There are some good things happening, but we need to realize that this is not strictly a Vermont problem. This is a national and even international problem, this housing issue. So there's limits to what we can do. That said, the 802 Homes initiative, I think, has a lot of promise. So they'll come up with these plans, and there'll be detailed architectural plans. So the developer would save money on architectural drawings and all that sort of thing, speed up permitting, and potentially have these be ready to go and to be built in modular factories so that they could lower costs there and speed up the process of construction. So there's layers of benefits to this potentially. So I'm hoping that goes forward. We need to try everything at this point, and this has potential, and it sounds like it's definitely worth trying. There's some other things going on in the housing committee that have potential as well. Like there's one bill which is controversial, but it's kind of a middle ground bill on tenant landlord law, which sounds horribly boring, but actually could free up a lot of housing existing in Vermont. Like the apartment I live in Montpelier during the week, the couple had traditionally rented to legislators, then they decided to rent year-round to get more income, and they had an absolutely horrendous tenant, which they couldn't get out for months and months and months, and it traumatized them. And so they left it unrented for many years until I talked them into renting to me this year. And that same situation is happening across the state. There's hundreds of apartments unrented because landlords have heard the horror stories about being able to evict a bad tenant. I've lived it myself. And it's a serious problem because we have these apartments already built, already permitted, ready to go, but our landlord-tenant laws are not good. So there's a bill to allow landlords to evict tenants much more quickly under certain circumstances. And it also gives tenants, takes away from the landlords. It's a compromise bill. No one likes this bill, which means it's probably good.
Yeah.
It's a compromise bill.
We need more compromise.
Landlords wouldn't be allowed to evict without cause, which is what tenant rights activists have wanted for a long time. And so, I hope this bill goes forward, because it's these things, this goes under the radar, but it could easily free up hundreds of apartments across the state. And so the Housing Committee is working very hard on this issue. And I also want to get to healthcare just for a second, because that committee is working really hard, and it's very difficult because there's so much national influence with Medicaid and Medicare and the big pharma and our hospitals and how they're regulated. But they've done a lot of good work in the last couple of years. And one of the big things we passed last session was reference-based pricing, which quickly gets very wonky, but it just has to do with lowering costs that hospitals charge, and that'll come into effect next year. And Vermont got $193 or $95 million from the feds to work on rural health care. And so they've been taking a lot of testimony on that. And a lot of that will be directed to primary care and training and housing for the healthcare community. So, I don't want to get the sense that, nothing good is happening up there. There's a lot of good work. It's very hard, but there's a lot of good work happening in Montpelier. It's just there's some real pain points as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Sounds like Chris, before.
Just to go back to housing real quick, there's another program that I think is underutilized, and that's the VHIP program. And what that program does is it buys blighted properties, homes that are in disrepair, and rehabilitates them and gets folks in them. And, the average price of a home, $600,000 in the state. VHIP is rehabbing these homes for $60,000 and getting folks in them. I can't remember the exact number, but I think there's over 100 blighted properties in Rutland itself that can fall in. And we've been taking money away from that program, and I think we need to redirect some. And there's been some challenges. I've spoken to some contractors that have done VHIP programs, and they're not happy about getting paid, and there's some things, but I think we should focus on ironing those out, because it's an easy way to restore, the integrity or the looks, aesthetics of the community. You got all these nice houses, and then you got this place falling in, and get people housed for a reasonable amount. There's a lot of stuff going on. I just think we could capitalize and utilize VHIP more than we are doing. So,
did they get level funded, or?
They did, but their funding went back. They took their funding away a few years ago, and it still went into a housing. I think it went to VHCB, but I just think it's underfunded for what it can accomplish, and it can do so much good quicker, I think. And the challenge is, and we talked about it a little bit before, when I got here early, is the average median price in a home is in Vermont is $600,000. Now, I don't know how too many Vermonters working within this economy that can afford a $600,000 home. And the thing that's more alarming, and it's something that I think we have to look at, and it's part of what I hope the Caucus for Vermont's Economy has a discussion on, $180,000 of that is regulatory. $180,000. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. I've talked to contractors, that have concerns about the costs that are involved in meeting some of these energy codes. A lot of this stuff that is required for them, they can't get in a timely manner. I talked to a contractor in Timoth that had a job delayed 90 days because this specific window or whatever, rating or whatever it was, had to be utilized. It costs the homeowner more money. It costs the contractor less money. We got to be more common sense about that stuff. And there's a bill, I think, in Chris's committee right now. I think it's 718. I'm not a big fan of that bill. All it does is it's going to create a
energy
residential
codes.
contractor regulation task force to have 11 members appointed to it. They got to file reports. Creates new licensing, creates education requirements, and just adds more costs, bureaucracy, and regulation to achieving these objectives. It's just a bad bill. And I hope it does, and I hope it stays on the wall. There are some bills that should stay on the wall, and to me, that's one of them.
Yeah. Well, that's already off the wall.
Yeah, and it's a member of the committee, Representative Campbell. It's his bill, and he's passionate about. He's a contractor. I think he builds houses and used to and stuff. Yeah. But it's just. This is another one of those bills that just harms people and makes what we're trying to achieve all that more difficult. So
I haven't read this bill, and this is kind of the first time hearing about it, but I'm assuming the idea behind it must have been to, save energy costs, that maybe there's some upfront costs that are expensive, but over the longer term, it would save money for the homeowner.
Yeah, exactly.
And cut down on energy use. I mean, is that what the idea behind it is?
Exactly.
But the people that most need housing need affordable housing. Yeah. And this just, for many people, this will be fine. There won't be any problems doing that. But it's gonna harm more people than it's gonna help. And I get part of what he's trying to do, because as I read the bill, there is no energy code in Vermont.
Yeah, though there's no construction code for residential housing.
Construction code.
I think we're the only state in the country left without a construction code, which is problematic.
Yeah.
And the energy code would and should be a subset of the building code. So we're not even taking up the whole building code issue. We're just trying to shoehorn a little energy code, or the bill is, I should say, so that we can think more long-term about energy efficiency and mitigating against the volatility and price of fossil fuels and that sort of thing. So there's some good constructs in the bill, but it's all trade-offs, like Representative Pritchard was saying. Our job up there is like weighing trade-offs. There's no easy answers to anything up there. There's once in a while you get a bill that's a no-brainer, but there's really, really hard trade-offs on all this stuff that we're talking about. There's winners and losers, and then there's, democracy is a hard thing to do. I have a new appreciation for it now that I'm up there.
Can be messy at times, huh?
Yeah, indeed.
Well, before we have to run, I wanted to give you both a chance, and you've already kind of alluded to some of these things, but what's been going on in your committees? Representative Morrow, I wanted to ask you, you're on the House Committee on Education and Digital Infrastructure.
And Energy and Digital Infrastructure.
On Energy and Digital Infrastructure. You have that plug-in solar bill, I think, right, coming over to you that passed the Senate, I guess.
After crossover, that'll come our way. It's relatively simple bill, I think, on these plug-in solar units, which you just plug into a regular outlet. You don't need a special
that seems like a
connection.
no-brainer.
These are popular.
It's a good bill that I can support, but one of the provisions that it's lacking is a cutoff.
No, I think it's in.
Well, they may have put it in, but that was a concern of me not supporting that.
Just as a safety
so
issue.
A safety issue of the voltage feeding back through the line.
Right. I'm pretty sure that's
concern for fire departments, Green Mountain Power line workers. As long as that's in there, the bill's kind of a no-brainer to me. That's something we can both agree on.
Hey, we got one. All right.
I knew there was a reason. But I don't know. Anything else going on that?
We've spent a lot of time on cell tower siting this term, which we thought was going to be a relatively quick thing, but turned into quite a number of weeks of work on. Really, the crux of that bill was how much involvement or citizens and municipalities can have in the process of tower siting, and not enough was the consensus. That there hasn't been enough. And so we came up with a compromise on that bill. Right now we're dealing with a net metering bill, which I presented on. I have concerns over, without the federal tax credits, that we're really going to lose our solar workforce across Vermont, because the numbers are really hard right now, and to make a system pencil out. And we've developed this workforce over the last decade or so, and they're really they're going to go away if we don't do something. But I don't think that's going to make it out of committee. We have a bill on the transition from copper phone lines to the new fiber lines, and making sure people know the implications around that, because with copper you didn't need power. You lose power at your house, you can still call 911. With the new fiber stuff, you lose power and you don't have a battery backup, then you're not calling anyone. So we just really reinforced the communication around that, so that citizens know repeatedly, they get notified repeatedly of how the new system works, and things like that. We have a bill on the parameters that utilities can use for disconnecting people from power, and just making sure that consumers are protected. So we got a lot of interesting bills going on. None of them are earth-shattering, but in the legislature, most of what happens are these smaller bills that are people are working on little pieces of the statute here and there, and most of that's good work, and some of it turns into good bills. But the big issues hog up the media time. But in terms of our time, most of our time is on these smaller issues.
Representative Pritchard over in the Committee on Environment.
Yeah, so we, for this half of the biennium, we've been working on about 4 or 5 bills. We have not moved a bill out of committee yet. I suspect that within the next couple weeks we will. 8632 is an environmental amendment bill that was put forth by Chair Sheldon. I think we'll be doing that. We've taken a lot of testimony on H276, which is the wildlands bill. It's a bill I can't support. We took a lot of testimony on this bill, but what stood out most for me was the testimony that we took from Forest and Parks and Recreation. They feel that this bill actually inhibits and causes more harm to the ecological reserves that we're trying to put in place. And their argument is, you've given us Act 59. Let's put that in place. We haven't even had time to do some of this stuff, and it's not supported by the agencies that we trust to take care of those things. Forest and Parks doesn't. It doesn't support the bill. Fish and Wildlife doesn't support the bill. It will have an effect, no question, to have an effect on the forestry industry.
What's this bill supposed to do?
So basically, it's conserving land, and also increasing our amount of old growth forests. And it will put some of those wildlands, put restrictions on them, forestry being one of them, that will have an effect on our industry, or the folks that work in this industry. We've taken testimony from one of the representatives in the House that's adamantly opposed to it, Jed Lipsky, from Stowe.
Who's a logger.
Who's a logger, yeah. One of the bills we worked on, it's a good bill. I actually co-sponsored it. I think it'll make it to the finish line, is a dam safety bill. Basically what it wants to happen is to have 2 EOPs drafted for 2 different dams, and these dams would be dams that are in highest risk.
EOP?
So it's an extended emergency operation plan, and it would be for dams that could affect high-risk dams, both high-risk dams, that could have an effect on 1,000 or more people if they rupture. Basically what it plans to do is put drafts and rules, and then have EAP, Emergency Action Plan, and then create templates where this can be done across the state. So we finally got past the first biennium of talking about cougars and beavers and stuff that really doesn't matter to people, and talked about a little bit stuff that's more important. We're working on a bottle bill and a tire bill, and that's really what's going on in environment right now.
Forgot the catamounts.
Yeah, the catamounts hopefully will stay. There's 4 of us on the committee that have asked for bills to come up, and I'll share those numbers with you. 870 is a bill about conserving the current use land in the 20 by 30, 20 by 50 number. It will get us to that goal. We want to take that up off the committee. It's been hanging on the wall since the beginning of the biennium, and it's still hanging there.
That goes back to Act 181.
Yeah.
The 30 by 30, 50 by 50. Those are future goals, or not goals, they're mandates, right, from Act 181.
Yep.
And he's just talking about including current use in the calculation of being able to reach those goals, and now it's excluded.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
So 8730, I think, was a bill by Representative Burt from Cabot, and it's just requiring notification property tax reduction for Act 250 181 designation impacts, which, on the mostly affecting the rural folks. H805 streamlines Act 250 permitting, and again provides property tax relief for restrictive land use designations, and then Representative Sebelius' bill, which I really hope will come off the wall and we can have a discussion on. So, so those are the ones.
Well, sounds like it's going to be a busy second half. I'm just curious, what happens to bills if this is the end of the biennium this year?
They go
election
away.
year.
We
have to restart everything right from scratch?
We have 900 bills in the House, 328 in the Senate, 1,228 bills. Each bill costs the taxpayer approximately $1,000 to draft. So far, we've passed 116 acts, so less than 10%. 85% of these bills, in dollars, actually it's higher than that, about $900,000 that was spent on bills. Those bills won't come off the wall until they go into the garbage can at the end of the session. There's tremendous waste, I feel.
Wow.
And that's in the time of legislative council to draft the bills. That's what you're referring to, right?
The time, the paper, we know what the paper's like. Special paper, not cheap paper. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I know everything is driven by bills there, but we got to have a little bit more common sense. And if you could read some of the bills that are introduced, you just shake your head. I do. Well, it
sounds like we'll have to have you both back at some point, talk about process improvement or something. How do we get into the 21st
We have a few
century?
opinions about that, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we'll have to leave it there for today, but thank you again, both of you, very much for making the time to come down and share your thinking with us. Representative Chris Pritchard from Rupert, Paulet, Middletown Springs, Wells, and Tinmouth. And I was forgetting one. Chris Morrow from Winhall, Londonderry, Andover, and Weston. Thank you both very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Thanks to all of you who've been with us. Hope you found the program informative and interesting. We'll see you again the next time. Take care.